mother's European, my father's African. So
Right.
why am I? I never asked myself that question before I came to the United States.
Yeah.
For me, it was me. And there was
Yeah.
no label in no application whatsoever if I had to put if I was black or white or other or I never had to put that. And then as I come to the US, now those questions are being asked of me. And I said, well, I don't understand. Why would I identify myself as either one or the other or none? Or why is it relevant?
My name's Dr. Christina Rahm, and I am a scientist and a doctor, but I also do a lot of humanitarian projects with governments or consulting with governments. And I met you and I was so fascinated with what you've done. And I really want to share your story because we have about 6 million followers in our different social media, and we have more and more people following YouTube because of amazing people like you. Because what I try to do is show the audience people that have worked really hard throughout their lives to really help humanity. And I do care about business, I care about science, I care about art, I care about music, but truly what I care a bit about is a person's intent to really help humanity and the mark they live, that they leave in this world, because you either leave a positive frequency or a negative, right? Either positive energy or negative, and you decide that in your life. And you have been such a great example of helping your country and helping the world and helping women. So I would love for you to start and just tell a little bit to the audience about how your story started when you were younger and how you got to where you are right now.
Wow, thank you very much. Thank you. It's a long story indeed, but I'm aligned with everything that you said. And also being a queen, it's about everything. It's not people are in science, people are in business, people are in nature preservation. So it's just us, doing all kinds of things, and our activities, and all of them matter, and the way we do them matters. So to care about people is also caring about what they do and how they do them, and really talk about consciousness and how we can really infuse everything we do with consciousness, and realizing that we all interconnected and interdependent. And in the world that we have today, that what we see, it's good to have good news, because the media and even a lot of the social media are saturated with only the worst that we have to offer, which I feel is kind of biased, because I think that it's not really who we are. I think we have more greatness to offer than the worst. But at the front seat and even the center stage. And so people who are doing great things, and the majority of people that I've met in my life are great people doing good things. So I think there is not enough spaces for that to be expressed. And I'm a psychologist. I know that negative information leaves a stronger imprint as well. So I'm a scientist as well. And I know that, this is what we retain. And then we start to pattern our behaviors and even organize our cell system to cater to that negativity. So there is a lot of need for the work that you are doing in terms of, putting out there, alternatives, and showing that, they exist and they're not a minority, they're actually a majority, but they just don't get center stage. So thank you very much for inviting me to your podcast. And I'm glad that we meet again. So my story is it's a lifetime story. I'm 40, I'm 58.
Well, you're beautiful. You look young. When you said 40, you hesitated. So I thought, man,
my soul think it's
you're
still
beautiful.
40.
Well, I wouldn't know that you're older than 40 because you don't have any wrinkles at all. I don't know if that's because you're a queen or if you just
good genes. Probably my mother and my dad. I got some good. And I think also the way you feel inside kind of maybe, radiates and whatever people see. I don't know. But I'm 58. I just got 58 a few days ago.
Wow.
And so it's a long story. But I was born in Belgium. My mother is European, and she's a Belgian Luxembourgish citizen. So she's a European, white woman. And my father is African, so he's a Black man, he's African, and he went to Europe to study. He had a scholarship from Congo that just received his independence from Belgium. And then a lot of African students would then go to Europe to study and get, a degree. So a lot of them who went, out of some of them married, met, women there, and they fell in love and got married. And it was not easy because it was in the 60s. So,
Yeah,
still a
I
lot
bet.
going on. In Europe, it was not the same situation as in the United States, but it was not so different. The sentiment was not so different. So many people around my mother's family and even in my mother's family were concerned that she was going to marry a Black man. But the Black man eventually, went to school, graduated, and then he got a job in the embassy of Congo in Belgium. So when he got this job, this is when I was born. So I was born, on the day he actually got the job. So he was working.
That's amazing.
He was working as a diplomat. So he was hired at the embassy to start his process to become a diplomat. So that's why I was born in Belgium, because my father was working, in the Congolese embassy, but I was born as a Congolese citizen. So few months later, we went back to the Congo. I then spent 2 years there in Congo, and then we moved to Germany because as a diplomat, my father was a consul, and so we went to live in Germany for 4 years when I was a child. So I spoke German from the age of like 2 to the age of 6, and I went to school with all the diplomat kids, and so I was in that environment growing up. Then we went back to Congo when I was 6 years old, and then that's when my adventure living in Africa really started, where I realized where I was, and then I grew up there. So I grew up in Congo until I was about 16 years old, with some interruption when I went maybe 2 years in Europe, and then I came back to Congo because I didn't like Europe at all. So I grew up
Oh,
there.
you didn't? You liked Congo? Yeah.
I liked Africa better because people, I feel, they're more joyful, despite all the rah in the media about
You're right. Yeah.
poverty and this and that. But there is something about the energy there. They have more solidarity. The families are much bigger. People live together. There's the neighbors know each other. The children play in the streets. We trust, each other. We share more, and we don't have all the stuff, but we have each other. And so growing up in that environment for me was amazing because I was, after school, I was outside all day long playing, and it was not so rigorous as maybe Europe was. School was an activity kids did among other activities. My activities was really playing and engaging with the children and so forth. So I grew up mainly in Africa, and then at 16 I had to go to Europe because my father got in a problem with the regime that was there. It was a dictatorial regime of Mobutu, the President Mobutu. It was a dictatorship, and my father was a high civil servant. He was not really involved in politics, but he got into some issues, and so we had to flee the country. And so at 16, I leave my country, my beloved Congo, Kinshasa, because I'm a Kinshasa girl, meaning I'm a big city girl. I grew up in a city. I don't know anything about villages and anything like that. And so we moved to Europe, and I'm extremely depressed, of course. But I get adapted, and so I grew up, and that's fine. And then eventually later on, when I have to go to university, I come to the United States. So I graduated from City University of New York, College of Staten Island. So I'm an alum from the University of New York, City University of New York. And so I've lived in New York for a couple of years, pursuing my education in business, finance, and economics. And then after that, I went back to Belgium, but I didn't go back alone. I went back actually, with a baby and with a husband that was, he's my ex-husband today, but he's American of Puerto Rican origin. So we moved to Europe and lived 11 years in Europe, developing real estate. I worked in real estate a little bit because it was my family business with my dad and my mom, and my ex-husband got involved. And then I moved out to work in a consulting firm for the European Commission, and I was a consultant, like an economic consultant for the European Commission and other governmental agencies in Europe, where I was just doing some work about analyzing, criteria of conversion to the Euro zone, analyzing the budgets and the requirement for the budgets to work for the EU enlargement. So those are questions that I dealt with, and I published some of my work as well in that field. But then after 11 years, my husband, who is American, he's my ex-husband, but he's American, decided that he wanted to come back to live in the US, because it was post 9/11.
Yeah.
There was a really sentiment of being unsafe in the world. American people were kind of feeling like that. And so I was like, my home is where I am, where my loved ones are. So I'm a daughter of a diplomat. So, I grew up around many different people. I traveled to many countries, so it's okay. And I lived in America, so I accepted to come back. So I came back with my children, my husband at the time. And then I decided that I wanted to go into teaching. So I went and got my certification for teaching French and mathematics, but then I got a job as a French teacher in the IB program in Florida. So I started to teach French. Unfortunately, I got into a bad accident and I became paralyzed from my left leg because of nerve damage after the accident and surgeries that followed the accident. So I couldn't walk anymore for a moment. And so even the prospect of me working were very dim because the nerve was terribly damaged. But I was like, I'm going to do everything I can. So I'm going to work. I'm going to work out. I'm going to do yoga. I'm going to swim. I'm going to do all the rehab. And eventually I got much better. It took many years, but I finally walk. And most people think that there's no handicap, but there is one that I conceal very well. And that's okay.
I can't tell. I've been around you. I couldn't tell.
But yeah, it's true. I conceal it very well. I compensate, and then when it doesn't work, usually people are not with me. Then and see, if you've been with me long enough, you're gonna know that sometimes I limp or I might, so it's okay. I recover. I'm very happy. And in the course of that recovery, I decided to go back to study psychology. Because as I was preparing for me becoming a teacher, there were a psychology class, psychology and education. And I went to that class and I loved it. And I said, well, while I'm in disability, I don't want to stay just doing nothing. It's my body. Okay, my mind is. And I couldn't go back to teaching. So I asked, if I could go to school. So they said, yes, you're in disability, but you can go to school. We're going to support that. So they supported me. And then I went back to school to become a psychologist. So I became a psychologist, mental health counselor. So I started to work as that in Florida, in Wellington, and in Boca Raton. I had split practice, and things start to really go bad for me in my marriage. So
sometimes that happens. Yeah.
A catastrophe. My marriage just went after 20 years, my marriage went belly up, which is, when you look at the 2020 hindsight, you get married when you're super young, and as it goes on, challenges makes you, become who you are, sharpen your personality. You have different aspirations, different dreams, different goals, and it is just life. So I have no regrets or anything. But what I didn't say, it's like from the moment I got to the United States the first time, there was a work that started to happen in my mind, and it's the question of identity. Because my mother's European, my father's African. So who am I? I never asked myself that question before I came to the United States. For me, it was me. And there was no label, in no application whatsoever if I had to put if I was Black or white or other, or I never had to put that. And then as I come to the US, now those questions are being asked of me. And I said, well, I don't understand. Why would I identify myself as either one or the other or none? Or why is it relevant? So then I started to learn about the issues in the United States between, the issue of race. And unfortunately, although African the continent suffered tremendous traumatism from a long period of, brutal maltreatment of African people. That story is not being taught in schools today in Africa.
Right.
So once colonization started, they basically wiped out our history about what had happened for centuries, where many people were captured and forcefully deported from Africa, and then what had become of them. So there's very little talk about that, and almost it's like we don't even understand because the information was not passed down and they don't teach it in school. Maybe nowadays it starts to be a bit different, but when I grew up in Congo, I never learned anything about the human trafficking era that happened for centuries in Africa with the Arab trade, what they call Arab trade, and then the European slave trade. So that's what they call them. I call them, of course, human trafficking. But I didn't know anything about that. We knew a little bit. The first time I found out, believe it or not, it was during the Kunta Kinte TV show. The roots.
You just didn't know. You just didn't know.
No.
Well, I have to tell you, even in our country, if you ask me, I grew up in a small southern town. It was in the Midwest, but it's south of the Mason-Dixon line. If you asked me if we were taught that, not really, but I ended up in 6th grade, did a project on the pioneers, and actually ended up going to Washington, D.C., ended up being one of the national leaders. As a 6th grader, I started looking into this, right? And what I found out was, wait a minute, we're not telling the story. Like, even when you talked about like the East going to the West, it's like there was no story of any of the slavery, any of the Black people, nothing. And it really, my family, my mother's family was Cherokee and Choctaw Indian. Same thing with that. There was a lot of stuff erased, right?
Yes.
So it became, for me, when people ask me what my favorite subject is, because I'm a scientist, they're surprised when I say history. But I say history because I feel like a lot of our history was not written or told the way it happened. And I feel like that's hurt all of us. And I feel like if we could correct that, there would be major changes to this world. And that's why I think it's such an important topic. I'm so glad you're talking about it.
I agree with you really 100%. So this is what happened is, so they didn't teach us this story. And even when they taught us about colonization, basically we were still using the same manual as the European who colonized us left, because they had the decision about them, what we could study. So a lot of the information we have it's about what the Europeans,
what they wanted you to learn,
to put in our. So it was like it was a good thing because you guys were savages, you guys didn't know anything, you guys were doing crazy practices, there was nothing there. So it was just the discourse we received. So we were like, oh, thank you, thank God we got colonized. So it was almost that, But then when I came to the United States, now I'm meeting with the African descendants of the United States, and they look at me like, oh my God, you come from Africa, you come from the land of our ancestors. And I'm like, well, yeah, but there was a huge lack of information. I knew that eventually, like I said, later on, I saw maybe a movie or two and the TV show Roots. And that's when I kind of understood that, yes, indeed, these African descendants, they come from the continent, and they have undergone a tremendous experience of abuse for many, many centuries, of not being treated as humans, of having no rights. But on the other side, there's another story. That's a story where these people were taken from. That was also traumatic. What kind of impact that had on our societies, and what kind of societies we had. So coming to the United States really gave me an open window into understanding a little more about who I was as an African woman, and understanding the African experience as a whole on the globe, but also here in particular in the United States, but also in the mirror in what's going on in Africa. So of course, when people were coming to me, they were like, oh my God, you're from Africa, it's so nice, how is it over there? And they were basically almost waiting for me to explain to them things that I even did not understand, because I didn't understand much about my own tradition. I did not understand much about my own history. I realized that I was empty. from that understanding of who I was as an African woman. Yes, I was from Kinshasa. I was a Kinshasa girl. I was from Congo. And yes, so but what did that mean? You know, what was that wrapped around? You know, what was the and so and then also because I got out of Africa, I experienced racism in Europe. You know, so that's another thing why I didn't like Europe, because people were very cold and they had so many prejudice idea about Africa and Black people. And so I was like, where do they get these ideas? So I had to confront racism really the first time when I went to Europe. And then when I came here, it was whoa, because here it was really like for me institutionalized. It was in the core of the institutions of the country. But I was discovering all of that. Yes, we saw the African Americans do good in the Olympics or on the world stage, you know, in the stadium, you know, singing and dancing. And yes, but when you look at movies or when you look at television series, most of them were doing, you know, poorly, like drug addicts, prostitution, gangsters. So it was always a very negative image of what the African people were. Oh, there was like once upon a time, there was the Cosby Show where you kind of had like a model African family, but it was not a standard. The standard was usually the portray of Black people as it was negative. And when I came here and I met all the amazing students from the city, University of New York, my college, I met their families. I was like, my goodness, this is a world that I don't know anything about. And when I left Africa, people were like, oh, be careful if you're going to go to America. Be careful, you know, the African people, the African Americans are maybe dangerous. And so they built that prejudice throughout the world to portray African American in a wrong way. When I got here, it was a clash because they were all but that. Yes, I know there are, you know, people are criminals but the great majority of the people, the African American people I met, were absolutely fantastic, kind, generous, welcoming, curious. They opened their arms to me. They wanted to know more about Africa, my experience of Africa. They were sharing about the experience. They taught me a lot. They opened their homes to me. I got to become their friends. And till this day, I have some of them that are really like my sisters and brothers, that are like my family. But thanks to them, I was able to learn about a different perspective of their daily life and the daily struggles here. So I started to study. I became an avid student of the African American experience, but also of the African experience as a whole. And that was important to me because it was about who I was. It was about defining my identity and being proud of who I am. And so here in the United States, I discovered even a new Africa, an Africa that I did not know about, an ancient Africa with a lot of history book in the Schomburg Library in New York, where I could go and learn about these amazing empires in Africa and kingdoms. And it was just a new window, a new world opened to me. But with that world came a lot of pride and a lot of also anger, because I was like, why is it that they didn't teach me that? Why is it that they never taught me in Africa about the kingdoms that we come from and how our societies were organized, how we had international commerce, how we had industry, how we had international relations with many different kingdoms, how we moved around the continent, who were we? I did not learn any of that in Africa. I learned that here in the United States. Yeah. So I find it to be healing and transformative because I could now understand more about who I was as an individual, and I could also drive great strength and pride from seeing the people, the stock of people I come from, and especially the African people, and seeing what we have gone through, what we were before, what we went through to see us go down so low and still be here and continue to be resilient and continue to be courageous and not stop our ability to create, to invent, to overcome. And that strength is something that is absolutely amazing about the African experience. And I've seen it all over the world. So this is in the background of me, of all those years that I just described earlier. I went to Europe, I worked, and then I came to the US, I went to school, and then I went back to Europe to work, and then I came back to the US to live and become a therapist. And also that gave me a great insight about, even my work as a therapist, about the diversity and how to approach, the different communities, and to learn about how to best serve my people. So this is really the background of me living my life as a mom here in Boca Raton, Florida, and being a therapist. And, I was married at the time, and my mother, lived here with us. And my father lived in Africa. My sisters are in Europe. So I'm a very international, family. I travel a lot to meet even just my family and friends. But then I go through a catastrophic divorce.
Yeah.
That was like, I call it the big catastrophic failure, because it is a failure, but at the same time, it's a failure, we learn from.
You learn from, any catastrophe afterwards, you learn from this.
Yes.
Yeah.
It was extremely, of course, painful, because, 21 years you married, and you think you project yourself, for the rest of your life. And then all of a sudden the whole thing just, blows up. And then all the pieces are now to be re-put together, or some of them you have to pick up, and some of them you have to leave, and kind of reorganize your life. And it's the midst of that I really went into a deep identity restructuration. I was like, but okay, so when you get out of a marriage, it's like you start asking yourself questions like, but who am I? Like, just not the wife, not the mother, not the daughter, not the friend, not the therapist, not who am I, me as a person? And so I thought to resource myself again, and to go back to the African, tradition, especially the spiritual tradition, because, in times like this, you need to restructure yourself, and you need to have good spiritual
You
practice.
do. I think it's a mark actually of people that are successful, is they restructure, or they recreate, or they find themselves in the process, because a lot of times what we're told, or who we're told we are, is not the right story. And I love what you said earlier, and I want the audience to hear this. I did not learn traditional things in history either. I learned what people wanted us to learn in the town I grew up in, and I love the town I grew up in. I had great teachers, amazing, but we learned from textbooks, right? So then I get to be older, and one of the reasons I've gone to schools in so many countries and stayed in school, and I was like you, I was a psychologist. I really wanted to learn and know the truth. And I've studied some of the same things you have, looking back at the different tribes, actually royalty. Like if you look at Ethiopia, I could go on, and Ghana and Uganda, Congo, all of these places, just the actual royalty that comes from these places, and the heritage of how they're passed on. And, I was knighted twice at the Vatican by different countries. And what that said to me, because our country in the United States, we don't really acknowledge any of that, right? We don't. And even if, if people are like, what does that mean? Who is that? And if they would go back and study historically, really where we come from, they would understand this heritage, right? That we all have in different ways, in different places. I love that you went back and found out who you are. I love that you spent the time, and I love that you're bringing that culture back so people understand it, because you're right. Unless you tell that story, people aren't hearing that traditionally in a textbook. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely. You totally on point with that. And yeah, it's kind of like similar path when you have to recover, pieces of your identity to restructure yourself. You have to decide, who are you, what piece, are relevant to making sure that you show up in the world as you truly are, and also open up a pathway for further development. So for me, I did learn a lot about Africa, and the amazing contribution that continent has had over the course of thousands of years, that is completely disregarded in the main discourse about the world and the civilization and Africa in general. Many people don't know that we were doing mathematics in Africa, in Congo, 25,000 years ago.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
They never mention Congo when they never even mention Africa when they talk about mathematics. They never mention Africa about medicine. But meanwhile, we are the ones.
I was going to say, some of the best medicine in the world. That's why when people ask me as a formulator where I learned about black cumin seed and turmeric curcumin, I'm like, go back 25,000 years, right? Go back to Africa. Go back and look at how people were using natural things and actually had amazing results. And then you're right. Here you come in with Western medicine and you're saying all of this is not accurate. Well, that's not true. There's a lot of scientific, mathematical history that we kind of discarded. That one of my missions, and you may or may not know this, and I know a lot of people know this about me, is to bring that together because it makes me very mad inside and angry that we discarded this whole past. Could have helped us be so much healthier and so much happier right now in our world, but we just got rid of it. You know, I mean, it's like we're not teaching it.
That's right. And this is what I said earlier. I was like, it made me angry because I felt cheated.
Yeah.
Why didn't they teach me about, the fact that we were doing astronomy thousands and thousands of years, and there's astronomic measurement tools on the continent of Africa, in Central Africa, to map the sky that is like 12,000 years, and they already mapped the sky correctly. They had all the measurement of the galaxy. It was, I mean, why? And it's, of course, it's because of it's always because of greed.
It's control, greed.
Control and greed. And it was because, listen, the plan for Africa, when they discovered that it was a well for human resources and all the natural resources, those people in power at the time and with the biggest gun at the time decided that we're going to go there and we're going to exploit the continent, and it's going to be a continent where we just exploit. So it's extraction. It's a continent for extraction. And how do you justify that? How do you justify that you're going to go and take people's land, that you're going to take people from their land and you're going to use them as human resources, and treat them as you do? That's psychology right there. And that's marketing also there. You need to now create a story, a propaganda story to wrap up, your misbehaviors as justified, because in front of you, what you have are not human and they don't have any major contribution. They don't have anything worth, looking at them as human. But in the meanwhile, all the museums in Europe, in America, and so have pieces that we created during the time that we were non-human, and you cannot buy them unless you have a couple of millions of dollars. So there
maybe billions. Some of them billions.
Because when you look at it with a magnifying glass, you realize, wait a minute, there's something that's not right here. But the story is, to dehumanize or to attempt to dehumanize another human being, so then you can exploit them, and also you can justify your right to behave as a non-human, actually, and just mistreat other people and then justify, just the same way as they're still doing today. So the greed and the very few who have driven by that, oftentimes arrange to have all the tools of power in their hand, which is money and which is force. So that's really, and of course, with the money, you can pay for propaganda and you can wrap things up. So when you start understanding that dynamic, then you start understanding what's going on the global stage, why Africa is the way it is today. So all of that to say that I decided to also look into something very interesting about Africa, is African spirituality. Because African spirituality has been demonized beyond any other. I mean, you can do yoga, you can go to an ashram, you can do meditation, India, Shiva, whatever. It's cool because, the artists made it cool. But when it goes to Africa, it's like, whoa, it's the voodoo, it's the evil, it's the this, it's the that. Oh my God, they do human sacrifice. It's a story. I mean, Hollywood just hit us nice with the serpent and the rainbow, and we got so scared of African spirituality. But then when I started to think about it, I was like, wait a minute. So what was happening before, we got all this Western influence and Arab influence into the continent. How did people live? So when you start looking at the organization of those kingdoms and the values that they carried, and you start realizing it was a completely different society. Why didn't they feel the need to develop like weapons to massively kill people? Why didn't they have a prison? The word prison didn't even exist. Why don't they have locks indoors? Why they don't have coffers with locks? What? Because those, why don't they have the words for these kind of things? Because those concepts didn't even exist. So that means that how did they organize their society for them to have no need for a prison? How did they organize their society for them to have no need to build a cannon or a machine gun or a gun? What was going on there? So when I went back and started to put that together, I realized it was because the fundamental piece was the spirituality. And the spirituality was about great reverence for life itself and life in all its forms. Doesn't matter. Life as a rock, life as a plant, life as water, life as a mountain, life as a cloud, life as a star, life as a sun, life as a human being, life as a dog, life as a fish. So life is at the core, the reverence for life is at the core of everything. And the way we act, so we don't need religion because the behavior is encoded with that reverence. So everything we do is almost a ritual. So we don't necessarily need to have a Sunday ritual, although we do have festival, but everything you do, you have to do on the premise that it's imbued with ashe, it's imbued with life. So when you're going to go greet someone, it's a ritual of greeting. When you're going to cook, it's a ritual of cooking. Because in everything you do, you have to put in that force of life and that profound reverence for everything that is going to be a defined life. So, of course, when you have that as a foundation, and you can see it, for instance, in Kemet or Egypt, what the Greeks call Egypt, the Mahat. The Mahat is the fundamental, piece that on which everything is built. So when you see this, you're like, oh, okay, I understand now why these societies were organized in a different way. The kingship system is different. The way you commerce is different. The way you exploit nature is different. You don't go and cut more trees that you need just because you have a bigger house. You cut what you need. So it was more an economy of need rather than economy of wants. So completely different. So then when I started to study the African spirituality, we have also what we call the oracle. So mainly it's a way to communicate, and you have that too in the native traditions with the spirit or with that energy that is life itself. And there are codes on how you can do that. And our ancestors, worked thousands and thousands, or hundreds of thousands of years to understand how nature works and how we interact with it. But we are nature, so we
are part of nature. Yeah, I mean, we are, and I feel like this is one of the things. Not to get off on religion, but I just had this conversation. I was in LA and with a very instrumental, powerful person in our world that everyone would be familiar with if I said his name, but I won't. He had a conversation with me about true spirituality is inside, and it comes from, it shouldn't be Muslim, Hindu, Christian, and everyone's fighting, right? Judaism, everyone's fighting, everyone's upset, but truly we're part of nature. We're part of God. I mean, we are here. And my job, and I say this all the time, is not to ever judge another religion or to tell them what to do, which is why it really is frustrating to me, because just like you're talking about in Africa, a lot of the Native American cultures are considered that they're cultish, like they're like evil or whatever, when really they're praying to God and nature, right, in a different way. And even when you learn about the different histories of religion, we've turned, but you're right, like movies and history have turned this into, and religion, because religion's power, right, has turned the natural beliefs that people have had in these tribes and these like you're living together in a community and loving each other. I love what you said, and I just want to go back to it. In the beginning, you said you missed the happiness, the community, everyone taking care of each other. It's one of the things, having traveled to so many countries, I see in the African countries, I see honestly in the Asian countries, I see in Ukraine and Russia. I mean, I'll just tell you the ability to take care of each other and not to have to pay sometimes for a haircut because it's just a friend and you're giving a haircut. We've lost that. But going back to what you're talking about, I'm so glad you're bringing it up because it's so true. So many people demonize something or make people think they're evil just because they have a different history or they had a different spiritual thought process, or they came from a country like you did where there were different things that they practiced. And this is wrong. It has to stop. It has to stop.
Absolutely. And also it, you know, because you have to ask the questions and say, okay, so we had the religions and then they had just spiritual practices. They were not really religions. They were spiritual practices of edification of life, so celebration of life. But like I said, the practice of spirituality is imbued in every single thing you do every day.
Everything.
The way you speak, so the way you if somebody needs your help and the way if you're not going to help, so all of that is spiritual practice. So your daily life is spiritual.
It 100%.
So
that is.
then you do have those moments where you do celebrate. So you have the celebration. So those are just tradition of how you celebrate that spirit of life, that force of life, and how you connect with it. And sometimes you have to summon, that force when you are in crisis. And so there's rituals about that, but it's not a religion per se. It's just a practice, a spiritual practice. But when I had to do a comparison and say, okay, so all those people that say, okay, we have the religion, because I was raised in the religion also, Christianity, and I looked at the history and I said, but how can these people who had all these religion do such horrific things in the name of those religion? And this is still what we can see today. It's like, aren't these supposed to make you a better person, to make you more kind, loving, to make you more understanding, more tolerant?
Not judgmental, more tolerant. Yeah.
Exactly. So it's like, where are you missing the point in the fact that these religions are teaching you that? So maybe it's something further that we have to understand, how they were put together, who put them together, why they put them together, to attain what objective, to basically, so if it was to attain control, of course, they can,
more money.
They were all money, So I said there is a fundamental need to organize in such a way that now, these religions pretend to say, oh, we're gonna, I mean, not the religion itself, but the people that are leading and organizing these ideas can also use them to basically, attain objectives like, control and gain access to different things and
power. A true God, and I'm just going to say this, and I was probably 3-4 years old where I understood this. A true God in heaven is not going to hate me based on who I love, right? He's not going to hate me based on the fact if I dance. Or if I have, it's ludicrous to me. I just have to say, I can't even get on the subject because for me, it's not that I'm against Christianity. I feel like I am a Christian. I believe in God in my way. I don't really need to explain it to someone else, in my opinion. Do you know what I mean? And if I want to dance or do something in Africa or the Native American to celebrate life, and my connection to life, which is what these religions do, or they're not even religions, they're a spiritual ceremony, right? You're celebrating your connection with nature, whether it's a leaf on a tree or an eagle, you're celebrating the love that we're here together to help each other. And why would that upset anyone?
Exactly.
There's nothing to be upset about.
So that's what I'm saying is when I studied, the religions as well, the Western and Oriental religions, and it's if we really go by what they say, then we should act with kindness and
100%.
love, And
100%.
how can we use that as a driver to mistreat other people, to belittle them, to abuse them, and then be okay with going on Sunday in the service when you
I don't
when
know, because
Monday
yeah,
you
because
went
almost all the religions are based on love. And so, like, how are we fighting over this? Like,
yes,
why? So let's say you believe one thing and I believe something different, but why are we arguing if we're just supposed to love and take care of each other? If we have a
exactly.
different opinion, okay, who
So
cares?
that's what you know, I understand, people say, oh, I'm Christian, but I prefer to say I'm Christ-like.
No,
So
I think that's good. I try to live like Christ. Do
yes,
I
because
fail? Yes, but I'm trying.
the
Yeah,
objective is how can you, like, what a
I like
Christ
that.
would do
Yeah.
in this situation? Would he belittle? Would he, throw the first stone? Would he judge? Would he insult? Would he? So
Would
that's
he
what.
take people's money and use it and never help them?
Yeah.
Would he feed the homeless? Like,
So
or is he going to use all of it so he can be the only one eating? Right? They're very simple, but it's a very, and even if you look at, and I'm not trying to, but Muhammad and you look at Buddha, they're really trying. And the Hindu religions, they're trying to show love in the different religions.
exactly. So it's like, so if you're truly following that, then why is it that there's no space for other ways of expressing the gratitude and the marvel that we feel when you look at God's creation and feeling so blessed to be part of it and feeling that we are also animated by that same life force that is imbued in everything. So what I understood about the African spirituality is basically what many of the indigenous spirituality systems are. It's really about realizing that we are part of a whole, and the whole is part of us. So
Right.
we are connected, and we have to give reverence to everything. We have to treat everything with respect, with reverence. We have to all do, our actions have to be only carried to make sure that we promote life, that we elevate life, that we edify life. It's nothing to do with anything to destroy. And when we need, of course, to interact with the environment so we can sustain our life, we still have to do it in a respectful manner. And we have to just get what we need and make sure that everybody around us have what they need so we can share, but not everything we want. Because when we only go after what we want, we become the society of extreme consumerism, where it's never enough, it's never big enough, it's never tall enough, it's never rich enough, it's not. So then there's no ceiling, and by doing that, we're creating imbalances between our ability to exist within the system, and and what is required to live within it in harmony. And I'm not saying, oh, you can't kill anything, you cannot cut a tree. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that we have to have measure, and we have to understand that everything is as a life, the same life force animates everything, including ourselves. So when I'm cutting a tree, it's not just that life force that I'm cutting. I'm also cutting a part of my life force. So
Yeah.
how do I now replace or rebuild that part that I just destroyed? So maybe
Right.
by planting another tree, maybe by the fact that when I'm going to use that tree to make a boat, I'm going to go fish. That fish is not just going to be for me, myself, and I, that I'm going to go share it with somebody else. I'm going to make sure that everybody in my community has fish. So it's so, yeah, that's the spiritual practice, is the way you live. So in that practice, they have what we call the oracle practice. And the oracle practice is basically a way to communicate. And there's different tools about that. And many cultures have them. And in my practice, it's a system that's called the Meridi Lagoon, or IFA. And then when I went because I was in the quest to find myself back, after my divorce, or while I was going through it, I needed something to get me spiritual strength and support and understand, and not be afraid, because of course, when your life blows up, you become afraid, you don't know.
Yeah.
And you're gonna lose some friends, you're gonna lose maybe the way you live, your house, whatever. So a human being needs that support, and I'm a psychologist, yes, so I went to psychology, but I also felt it was important for me to enhance my spiritual practice. And in that course, the oracle, I did my oracle reading, and in the oracle reading, it said to me, you were born a queen, you were born with a crown on your head. And I was like, okay, I took it as, I am a woman. It's all in me. So
You're the
I'm gonna
queen.
make it.
I love that.
I'm
Yeah.
gonna make it. That's what it meant. I'm the queen of my life.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
love that.
this is a great stressor. My life is just blowing up, but I'm gonna make it. I'm gonna reign over my life. So that's how I
Right.
took it. Didn't take it literally like, oh, I'm gonna be the queen of the people. Never. I thought, hey, I'm gonna just master this, just stay put, just work through it, go through it. You'll be okay. So that's how I took it. But then in the course of those year that followed, I connected with my father because I was having a weird dream. I was dreaming that an old lady was looking at me sleeping. And then I would wake up in my dream, of course, and then I would look at her and I was like, but why are you here? And she would not respond. She would just smile. And then that dream was a recurrent dream. So I was like, why is it I'm keep dreaming about this lady? And then she would get closer and closer every time I would dream of her. And she was an African woman, like a little tiny old, lady. Maybe she must have been like 100 or something. And she was all shrunk and wrinkled, and but she was very gentle, very frail. And then one day I dreamed of her and she was crying. She was really crying, and then I said, but why are you here? Why are you crying now? And I started to cry with her. And then she pointed something in the horizon. And when I looked in the horizon, I saw a village burning. An African village, the kind of African village that you would see in National Geographic, because I
Yeah.
never seen one at that
Yeah.
time. Never been in a village. I grew up in the city of Kinshasa, and
Yeah.
today Kinshasa has 20 million people. So I grew up in a mega city. I never seen a village in my life in Africa. So I saw a village burn, like the mud homes and the thatch roofs, and I was like, "What is that?" And then there was drama going on. Children were being killed. Women were being raped. It was just a horrific scene. I woke up from the nightmare, and then I was like, "Phew, what does that mean? Why I keep having this dream?" And I couldn't figure it out until the next morning. Something just hit me. I never seen a village. I don't know where my father was born. My father was not born in a big city. My father was born in a village inside
Right.
the country, like deep in East Luba. So the Kingdom of Luba is in the middle of Congo, and I never been there. I was like, it dawned on me. I'm talking about my identity, this, my identity, that, but
You'd never been there.
I never even been where my father was born. I never seen his relatives there. I've seen those who came to the city, but where was he born? I wanted to. So in my spiritual quest, I said, you know what? I'm gonna call my dad and I'm gonna tell him that I want to go and see where he was born. I want to go deep in, the rural area of Congo, deep in the forest to go see where he was born because he left there when he was 12 years old. So okay. My father was like, oh, that's weird. Why would you want to go? I said, Dad, I'm just going through something. I need to
Yeah,
see
you just
where you
want to
were
see it.
born. It was
Yeah.
just picking up pieces of who I was at the time I needed to rebuild myself. So my father was a bit uncomfortable initially, and he was like, okay, so when you come back to Congo, we'll go. So before I go back to Congo, he sends me a letter. He says, well, I have to tell you a little bit about because I complained that he'd never spoke about his family,
Yeah.
where he came from. I was like,
Right.
why is it that we don't know anything about my grandparents, my great grandparents? What was going on? I know you left when you were 12, but still, you must remember something about who they were. And so he wrote me a small letter saying to me and my sister, and he said, well, I'm going to explain to you why you have the name you have. So he explained to my sister has first, her name is Chilomba, the other one is Kujundi, and I'm Diambi. So he explained why he gave us those names. And then it was just baffling because in the explanation, he was basically telling us that his mother, Chilomba, the name of my older sister, was a princess. She was the firstborn of the King Tshiyoyo Muata.
Yeah.
And my name, Diambi, was the name of his grandmother, who was the queen. So the spouse of the King Tshiyoyo Muata. And I was like, what? Where is that coming from? And I realized, yes, that story was not told because my father find no relevance in telling that story because now he was in a new world. He was from
He
colony.
just left the story. Yeah.
Forget the past, Yes, we were savage. Yes, whatever. It's not going to serve us anymore. Now we have to get with the flow. We have to go to Europe. We have to get those degrees, become accountants, become economists, become lawyers, become engineers, and then just go into building this new Africa and forget about the past.
Yeah.
Father left at 12 and he never returned until he was 65. Wow. So that gap, he also gave it to us, meaning that we grew up in the city. Like I told you, my father was a diplomat. He worked as a civil servant in the Foreign Affairs Office. He was a well-established man. For him, that was well-educated. That was the success. Success was to become more like a Western.
I understand that. More Westernized. Because at the time, they had taught that they were savages. So that's such an interesting story. So he left behind basically being royalty, even though you never leave it behind. He left the title for a while.
Yeah, because it was in nowadays it was irrelevant. Okay, so you can be prince from a tribe over there in the forest. So what? What does that get you?
I think it's relevant because I have to tell you, I've gone to Africa many times and I've met different kings and queens, and I've always found it fascinating. I mean, because they are responsible for their village. I mean, they are responsible for their people.
Yeah, but for my father, that was not relevant.
Yeah.
Because he was now in the capital city.
Right. He was
living his, and he didn't see his children ever go back. None of my sister never asked to go back. I was the only one who said, I want to go back. So I guess he wanted to set the stage to say,
he wanted you to know,
your welcome is gonna be a little, because I confronted him. I said, why are you telling us this now? I wish you told me I was a princess when I was 5. Because they forgot all about people looking at, the princess movies and the queen's movies. Disney, zapped out that there was an entire continent, and even more than a continent, there's people looking like me all over the world.
And you're a princess.
A princess, So, and as a kid, when you wanted to play the princess, you're gonna be the princess girlfriend, because you're not the blonde, you're not the one with the blue eyes.
But still, it would have changed your life a little bit if people would have known that. I mean, I'm being honest, because
but maybe it was for the best, because then I grew up as a regular kid, and I love the way I grew up, so I don't have a problem with that. I would have had maybe a different personality. I was catered to as the princess. It just happened, and it's fine the way it happened. So that came as a shock. So I was like, okay, so I'm gonna go back. I brought my sister with me, and then we prepared an expedition to go for the first time in the land of my ancestors of the Congo, the Luba Empire. So I was like, okay, that's gonna be exciting, and it was both. It was heartbreaking and exciting at the same time, and wonderful at the same time. Heartbreaking for what? Heartbreaking because I saw that in the deepest confine of my country, there was nothing of the modern amenity that were brought there. So the roads are very bad. There's no electricity. There's no running water. There's none of that. But at the same time, it was great, because you know what? I really saw what the Garden of Eden looked like, because I felt when God created this planet and brought all kinds of lives in it, including us, this is really how he intended us to live, because everything is there. Everything is provided for. You need electricity for what? You have the sun. The sun is going to light your day, and the moon is going to light your nights. You have every food you can imagine is right there. You can eat a different animal every single day of the year. You can eat 360 different animals, because there's so much abundance. You have plants, you have medicine. All the plants are medicine, and you have the soil is rich, and it's just, and the beauty is just overwhelming. So when I got there, I was like, oh my God, I am really literally entering into heaven, into the Garden of Eden. And the people are simple. They don't have all this stuff, but you know what you hear when you wake up the first thing in the morning? Children laughing and giggling and running around the village and playing. This is what wakes you up, is the birds and the kids giggling. It's not, this crazy alarm that makes you wake up like a robot and go to work in the cubicle and, come home, open your mailbox find all the bills and make all the payments and then dumb scroll on your on your phone to just get your. It was, you had to be there, you had to be present, and
Yeah.
from 4 o'clock in the morning you hear the rooster and life starts, and it's just like, and you hear the women call each other and go to the field to start working on their fields. Some of them are caring for the babies. It's like, oh, what a scene. And yes, I'm not saying that everybody should live like this, but I'm saying, wow, if we just were satisfied, we would have been okay, because everything was provided for us. We didn't need to medicine. We came through time for hundreds of thousands of years living like this. And
well, 100, that's what I think people need to remember. There's different ways to live. There's different ways to do treatments. There's different ways to be happy. And it's not all around, capitalism or money. There's lots of things in the peace, the countries I've gone to where I feel the most peace. There's been times I haven't wanted to go home because you don't have that here where, where I live. I mean, I'm thankful I get to work in different countries, but that peace of just the quiet is why I love going to our farm, because I don't have to deal with, all of the rat race and everything else. But I think spiritually, you need that too, to feel that calmness, that peace, and to really connect with nature. And spiritually, I feel like that's really the church we need to go to, like to really connect. I would love to talk to you all day. They keep coming in because I have another podcast, but I want to tell you this. I respected you so much when I met you a couple of times at the Vatican and the Science Pontification Academy. In person, I don't know if you remember, I even touched you. We're like, you can't touch that, that's sacred. But your heart is so good. And you could tell you were raised in a very good way by your mother and father. I know they're from different backgrounds, but your humility and kindness and understanding of the world is such a gift. And your message, we will continue. We'll put this on Instagram in short bits, and then we'll also put out the YouTube, and we'll cross-pollinate with our 29 brands so that people can see you. And I just want to tell you what a pleasure it's been and how thankful I am to know you and to be able to hear even more about your story. We'll have to do another podcast because I have a lot of more questions.
Oh yeah, there is because from that moment, this is when I was crowned and I became a queen. And of course, now from that moment on, what unfolds is that desire to be a servant beyond everything, to see that I'm working to edify life in every circumstances, no matter where I am, and to serve whoever is in front of me, regardless if they are from my tribe or not. So I put my life as a servant. And a kingdom is whoever is in front of you. So that's what a kingdom is. So that's what I've been doing ever since, with my engagement, my advocacy for the protection and preservation of nature, my work, in humanitarian work with the orphanages and with the children's hospital, and with the water wells that I put all over my land in the Congo, and my advocacy for just how we can, restore ourselves to our true nature, a nature of kindness and compassion and understanding and open-heartedness. And I find that all over the world. And I'm going to close. I know you have to go, but I'm going to close.
No, but I want to do a podcast on what happened from the time you were, because we didn't get to that, and you're mentioning. And all that stuff is really important because I like to show what people do in power and when they get to a power position to help humanity. Because those are the people that I really believe in, that I want other people to hear about. So we'll set that up because I would love to hear what you've done since then. I have heard part of it at the Science Quantification Academy, but I want our audience to hear it. So we'll set up another podcast when you have time. And I thank you so much for your time today. It means a lot.
Thank you very much. Thank you, dear.